Hello, everybody. Welcome until the end of times. Welcome until the end of times. Welcome to day 5, 6, 7. I don't know of our one composition a day thing. You know, I was sitting here working out a piece. Like I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, and don't feel like doing it at all today. Just whatever. Whenever my son goes back to his mother, it's just always like it just takes the wind out of my sails for a portion of the day. So I was sitting here and I was like, well, I don't really want to be doing anything. But I thought, well, maybe this would be a good time to just let people in on you know what it looks like when I'm sitting around trying to come up with something. The true exposed underbelly of the beast. The truth is, for me, if I'm sitting down, it sounds crazy. Like the whole thing sounds crazy. It doesn't sound like anything. I mean, I'll show you what it sounds like. Also, by the way, people have been asking, when are these streams going to be happening? I don't know, like when I think of it, kind of, maybe. There's no set time. But anyway, like a lot of times what I do is... I told you that I always record myself. When I sit down, something's recording. And it's because I tend to I just tend to do something and I get either really bored with it or I make a decision about whether it has anything in it or not right away. And so I'll go all over the place. And I had sat down and I was thinking yesterday about... we were talking about modes and stuff, and I was thinking about that Lydian sound, which is I was thinking that's one of my crutches. I love it. So in my mind, I'm sort of thinking about something that's sort of swimmy. As far as to get at the idea, anyway, fuck that. And I just move on. Like I don't know. I don't really immediately know. Generally, the way I do it is that if I don't immediately know what to do, I move on. That's still in there. So I did something else. So I was like, about as far as I got on the idea. Fuck that. And I was like, oh yeah, people were asking yesterday about like Western stuff. Fuck that. It's like the 900 millionth John Williams thing. I don't want to do that. And then moved on. Let's move on to something else. Just... This is exactly what it sounds like. Just, I don't know. So when I'm just noodling around during the day, if you're over at my house, this is exactly what it probably drives people crazy. But it's just like this sort of whack-a-mole, like abandoning little snippets of ideas really, really quickly until I feel like something sticks or there's something that I'm interested in more than 2 seconds. And I can tell right away if it's one of those days where I can make it happen. Today's one of those days. I could now just sit down and go, okay, just pick one, pick anything, and bang it out. But lots of times that's what I'll do, and I'll go all over the place. What else? And I'll just move on, and I'll just sort of let it. That's what it sounds like lots of the time. Unless I have a specific goal, it's just all this like weird. It's this weird free association. It's like just, and I abandon them. I'll go through maybe 100 of things like that over the course of like whatever it is, however long. I lose track of time when I'm sitting at the piano. And every once in a while, I'll hit on something and just be like, well, maybe I should talk about how you use, and I'll say, but more often than not, I try to let the natural thing dictate the day. So if it just seems like I keep coming back to floaty stuff, it's obviously that kind of day. And if I keep playing groove stuff, it's that kind of day. Because unless I'm on a gig, I think this is the most important time. And if any one of those ideas I blow past, I decide later, you know what, I had done a thing, well, there's a recording of it. But in the meantime, you don't have to be like, and now I'm writing this piece, and now I'm writing this piece, or I cannot write more than 2 pieces at one time. No, there's no rules for it. The most important part for me is that there's just as little in between impulse and realization as possible, so that it doesn't ever feel like a chore. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't go anywhere. And so for myself, like I said, when I was starting today, and I was like, God, I use this shit all the time. Sometimes I'll do a thing like, we're just going to write a piece that's all that and try to burn that out of the system, except I've been saying that since I was 17 and I never get tired of that sound, so that just may be one thing. But where I get in trouble is if I overthink it and try to think, okay, well, what do people want to hear? What should I do? Because I know how to write stuff, but that's not where I want to write from. You know what I mean? Somebody says, I have been waiting for you to come on screen because I have a question. So you have any tips for getting faster at writing music on paper? I often get really slowed down trying to figure out rhythm and syncopation especially. Okay, well, if that's the reason you're slow, is because figuring out rhythms, so then learning to subdivide, just like I'm teaching Draco, that has nothing to do with paper. That's a thing that you should be doing independently. And that's why I'm teaching him to sing and play at the same time, because that way the actual syncopation or the rhythmic subdivision is built in. And it's one of those things where if you really have it in your head locked in, then the actual putting it down on paper, there's not, if you just set a quarter note or a dotted eighth, but if you have to think about it, if that's another process, like what am I actually doing there, then that's going to slow you down and that's going to be depressing. So we did this on the air the other day. I think it was like, I was having to do the chords. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and right 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E, and I was having him do that. Because then it's 1E and a, okay, so it's 1E, that's an eighth rest. 1E and a 2E and a 3E. It's not there's nothing to it. You're just writing it down, but you know it already. You're not have to figuring it out. So making that a part of your thing will just increase that speed. The actual writing it when it comes down, don't worry about your handwriting or anything in the beginning, unless you really want to have unless you want to be a copyist. which case that's really a separate study. But just in terms of being able to get it down, just like get it down on paper, only you have to be able to write it. But if that's where it's slow, it takes me time to figure out my own rhythm. Okay, well then when you're writing it, your exercises has nothing to do with paper. It should be you connecting with your own rhythm. And always playing to a metronome, always subdividing when you're learning will help build your internal metronome, but then will also connect you rhythmically to the stuff. Yeah, I mean, I was a drummer from way back. I had been taking piano about 5 years when I also started doing percussion. It was really mostly percussion. I wanted to only play kit, but I could read music. So that means when you're in the percussion section, if you're the guy who can read music, you're playing all the pitched percussion. You're playing timpani and bells and glock and xylophone and marimba and so. But in bands and stuff, I like playing drums. But so kit anyway. So I always had subdivisions were always a part of what I was doing, and then it's just like you're just writing down what you're saying. And Draco and I drill that too. Where we'll just like if we're at a restaurant and they always give them the kids thing. He always flips it over to the backside, and then like we'll just do little exercises where I'll write out little rhythm things and see if he can clap it and say it in real time, like transcribing or sight reading. Benefits of putting transcriptions into paper. Well, because that is another way in which it goes from something abstract to something tangible. And just apart from the fact that it'll actually, if you're transcribing anything of note, the longer it is, the harder it is for you to keep it in memory as you're learning it. Whereas if you're writing it down and you have it, I mean, you went through the work. In fact, somebody asked yesterday, Jack Dejohnette, I love Jack Dejohnette. He's one of my favorite drummers of all time. He can make a groove out of things that should not groove at all. I don't understand how he does it. I mean, I do, but I don't. I could talk about Jack for a while. But anyway, yesterday somebody asked about the death theme from Untouchables, and I couldn't remember it. And then this morning, I put it on for a second, and I was like, all right. So I did a transcription this morning, essentially. I mean, I spent all of 5 minutes on it, but I didn't write it down. So if that person comes back, I guess I can do it now because they can look on. I probably don't remember it. Like, I know it, but I don't remember it. I learned it. It was... But... it's a long enough piece that unless I wrote it down, it was probably... That's way better than I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to clam the shit out of that because I didn't write it down, and it was this morning. Still, it would have been better to have written it down for a lot of reasons. It'll make it tangible. And when you actually see things laid out, it gives you a different understanding of it because there's an art element to it. I talk about this in some of the orchestration classes. But if you're going to go through the trouble of it, go ahead and put it down. And the time that you spend with it will cement it and make it real. Did you write the lead sheet or every single note? When? I didn't do anything this morning. I just did it by, I listened and then I was like mad at myself because I think yesterday when I was trying to figure out, I was like, but it's not, which you could argue, but there's a lot of things in that where, where like one note either way would not fundamentally change it, which is why it's easy to forget. Anyway, it's great to put on paper. Yeah, for sure. So I would, sure, if you're going to do it, especially because in it, like, if you're doing this particular piece, it gives you an opportunity. Is that in there, or is that in there, or is that in there? You have an opportunity to study voice leading, and you get to see how often they break all the rules of tonal harmony. Now, one of the things that's tricky about that particular piece is that the melody is that this doesn't always happen, but it does happen sometimes. That the melody, there's actually chords above it. It's not the top note. There's the strings are playing chords above the melody note. So when there's this. That's the melody note, but the strings are actually still holding onto that G. Which is why when they move up to, that's still the melody note. And then the strings are up here. So it can be a little bit tricky in a transcription because, our sort of expectation is that the melody note is the top note. In that case, if you really want to get the voicing right, it's that tortured thing. And this stuff too, that's an internal voice for the strings. Anyway, so it's good to write it down, and it'll just help you focus better on what it is. By the way, we were talking about some of the Star Trek stuff, and the Star Trek TV stuff, and to me the quintessential Star Trek thing is that stinger, which I think they wrote for maybe the second episode, and it's used every time that a Vulcan nerve pinch happened, or anytime something like mystical or dangerous happens, and it's this one. right? You know that one. No, whatever it is. You can't really play the way they do it. It's in octaves, but there's the cello going, so you can figure out how you're going to play that. That's the Star Trek. To me, that's all you need for the entire. That's all you need. It is a. That's my ex-wife's ringtone. Oh God, that's so great. I never thought of that. We get along great now, but if you listen to that cue, it seems like it's complicated, but it's not. It's just this little stinger. That's all it is. They have this one other sting that's in the piece that they use all the time, and it's like but there's a drum thing and another note in there somewhere, and it's just woodwinds holding that. It's like a really common. It's got a like a wah pedal thing on it, and it doesn't sound on piano like it sounds, but that's all it is. There's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of it's like really, really simple, and so it's fun to. That's what's fun about transcribing is because so often, the most common thing that you'll come across when transcribing is that you're like, that's all it is? Yep, that's all it is. Things tend to sound a lot more complicated than they are. But as we talked about yesterday, having a library of all that stuff in my head helps. Because God knows if I was in some stuck for something, I'd be like, well, I know this works. I could do it. That'll be my version of it. Oh, wait, no, that's the transporter. You didn't know the transporter was a whole tone scale? You have to bend it up and down just a little bit. And yesterday people were asking, so, anybody who was asking about composer stuff, I guess the class is called Impressions. You should go get Impressions because that was fun. But I know that people were asking about Danny Elfman, and Danny Elfman has had a few seasons. His initial season was all whole tone scale. It was all, it was major. That's all I did. Then it was minor. And then he went into this thing that he does a lot where it's just this kind of thing. Like that's like all his Spider-Man movies or whatever, they all have that in it. It's just with a big choir, you just have to have the things going up and down. But he's had some good scores over, like anytime he gets into his, like, I like Men in Black. Anytime he starts getting near something that's got kind of a pop structure. Actually, you know what my favorite Danny Elfman score is? Because it has almost no Danny Elfman in it. I don't really know where he came from. Is Midnight Run. It's actually my favorite score, and it's a great movie too. It's a Martin Brest film with Robert De Niro and John Ashton in it, and Yaphet Kotto, and it's and Charles Charles Broden? Is that his name? Charles Broden. Anyway, is that his name? Great movie. Martin Brest did Beverly Hills Cop. Oh, and Joey Pantoliano is in it too. Who's great as a scumbag. Bells Bosman, great movie. But I love the score. It's just this pop kind of. But it's actually got a lot of stuff in it. So that's a good score. That's my favorite Danny Elfman score, probably. Hello, Mike and all. Sorry for the delay. I am still delay. What delay? I'm still working on my recreation of Jerry Goldsmith and Brian Tyler's Universal Pictures Centennial Fanfare, based on the former's 1997 logo. Oh, good. Charles Grodin, right. Charles Grodin, that's it, yeah. No, it's not a delay there, brother. We're, good. If you're working on something, you just work on it. Keep working on that. That's good. But if you are working on something and you want to tell people about it, best way, launch it on a channel, do a breakdown of it. Do a post on Red Band about it. Like if you've actually gone through a process and have stuff to do, you post away so that it doesn't get lost in some like weird comment thread on a, you know what I mean? Like put it on the forum. That's what I built Red Band for, specifically for that. If you're working on a project and you've done a thing and and you want to share it with others, like and who really, musicians? Yeah, that's a place to go, for sure. Yeah. I had been away from VI Control. I just took a turn into it. Holy shit, a 17-page discussion about you. I'm very important. You don't understand. I'm very influential. My opinions change lives. That's just the fact of it. What I say, it is very, very, very important. So that's why there's 17 pages about my opinion on something. I don't know why there's 17 pages about stuff. I mean, I never go there, and then I went there the other day, and somebody told me, they're talking about you on this forum. And I went there. The whole thing is a dumpster fire. It's always a dumpster fire. And no music. No, there's never discussion about music. But it was just a few rounds of sparring with people. Fuck this. But yeah, it's way easier to talk about people and do all that stuff than to sit down and learn how to write some fucking music. mean, music may be the great uniter, and it may be the thing that brings us together. We all have in common. It may be that which, no people can imagine a world without. But musicians are still shitty to each other, just like anybody else, because they're people. Whatever. In the end, I mean, I believe we are what we do. I believe we are what we put out in the world. You do your best to be a good person. You'll fall short of the mark. Just accept the consequences of your failures. Try to make up for them best you can, and not do them again, and move on to new mistakes. That's your job as a human. So, but if you enjoyed any part of that drama stuff, then that's also good. Is Red Band a forum for composers, or is there a particular angle that you have in mind? Well, it is I started for composers. Red Band, REDBANNED.com. I started for composers. Actually, it's the antithesis to the forum VI Control. My forum is actually about musicians helping musicians. There's no drama and bullshit. You can talk about anything on the forum, and it doesn't. But it's also a very small forum, because it is dedicated truly to everything that we're doing here. Like, I actually want to get better. That's what it's about. We're not going to talk about, there is almost zero discussion about samples or equipment. There's all discussion about music, how to write, how to modulate, how to develop themes, about getting feedback, or where our score resources, exercises to do. If you really and legitimately totally wanted to be a better composer, Red Band is where you would go. Just because that's all that goes on there. I mean, there's an off-topic forum, but it's like, it actually is about music and musicians. So it's a very small group. I think there's less than 1,000 members of it, but it's 1,000 real members. And everybody's cool. Everybody's cool. One of the rules that I made when I started it is that there's no aliases. None. Everybody has to use their real first name and last name. That's it, real. Because that literally kills 99.9% of germs. Just accountability. No, you're going to actually be a human being in this process. I mean, it's amazing how that just curbs all that internet cowboy shit. It's like, we're not going to put up a thing. Which partly because it's my fucking forum and that's how I want it, but practically speaking, it instantly makes things more civil, but has never curbed discussion. It's never curbed any kind of opinions. Like, I welcome that. I prefer all the really dramatic stuff out, because I think that's part of our wellspring as composers. If we have things or topics or guns, religion, Donald Trump, the virus, if we know that those things are that we have passionate feelings about them, even adversarial, well, that energy, that's just raw energy. And if we're smart, instead of wasting it volleying back and forth against brick walls on social media, that's like we've gotten a little nuclear core to go write music with, to try to express ourselves with. And so I always invite that kind of thing, because it's good for composers and people, I think, to get in the habit of airing out what's going on inside them. Especially if your goal is to be a good human being. If you want to be a good person, you're going to have to field test the person you actually are, and not the person you can pretend to be on social media. You know what I mean? Like, because anybody can lie and say anything, but getting the truth in your life, it helps with the music, because our unique thing in being in the music is what makes our sound unique. But if you're not in there, if you and your unique and your particular unique journey isn't in your music, well, that's a huge liability, and you're making your life a lot harder, because that's the wellspring where your most creative ideas will come from. And the most controversial thoughts and ideas are also the ones most laden with raw power. What you do with that power is up to you. But as an artist, I kind of feel like, well, that's our job. Our job is to get that stuff and do something with it. in fact, if we can turn all of that animosity or any of that stuff, if you can actually turn it into a piece of music, then it's like the most incredible conversion. It's like turning anything into gold. It's the ultimate alchemy. Because if what comes out on the, no matter how much bile you have, if it comes out in music, music doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, I guess unless it's a lyric song and you're screaming about something. But music, certainly instrumental music, it's a great, it'll end up being an expression of something positive. It's a good thing. So, music is not the universal language. Okay. Happy National Film Score Day. Okay, if you say so. Speaking of Trump, I don't know anything about, I have never seen Donald Trump in action, but I will, his press conference is in progress, but this is a perfect alternative to that presser. Okay, well, I don't have TV, I've never actually seen Donald Trump as the president. I know he was elected, I don't have television, I don't watch the news. I do know the world didn't end. I do know that nothing in my life, or actually anybody's life that I know, actually changed day to day. Like nobody was locked in jail. Like women weren't all locked in jail, and like I still go to the store and pick up my son. And so just for me, I seem to have whatever the big fallout is that's had people screaming. I seem to have avoided it, but I can't talk intelligently about anything. I can't talk about political. I just can't. I don't watch it. I don't know anything about it. Although what's funny is that if there's like a COVID virus and everybody has to stay at home, it's funny because you can't miss the news. If it's really news like that, like you can't miss it. I've never to this day haven't seen actually any news about COVID. Not one single, not a clip, not a radio thing, not one. I have not even once seen anything because I don't have it. But how could you not fucking know about it? Everybody's talking about it. Everybody else will do that work for you. So people are like, oh, you got to stay home. Oh, yeah? Okay. For all I know, it's a big prank and everybody's out playing baseball. But anyway, so I tried to turn into music some feelings about political event. It didn't turn out very well. Well, you know, a lot of that will be dependent on your skill set, because if you're angry and all you can do is, okay, well, then, yeah, it's not going to go very well. But that's exactly one of the times in which, you know, you're having a harmonic vocabulary, or even finding the vocabulary to express what your feelings are. That's the great work. Because you know the simplest thing would be to take something that's upsetting you and make it minor, right? But with a little introspection, with a little awareness of human beings, somewhere very closely tied to all that anger is self-concern and fear. It's always, 99% of the time when people are angry about something you're doing, they're really not worried about you. They're worried about them and that somehow it'll come back and affect their lives, and that's why they're mad that you're doing it. Selfishness and self-motivation and fear are usually part of the building blocks of righteousness and anger. So those are that's just a thing about human nature. So those are much more interesting things, more complex things for you to express harmonically. And so the work of actually trying to figure out, dig into yourself, you know, even force yourself to get past all the Pavlovian reactionary stuff. You know, we're not just amoebas. We don't just respond to stimuli. We can engage our brains and we can get in there and try to figure out what we're doing. That's an interesting and productive path for your expressions as an artist. You know what I mean? You know, any thoughts on Hitoshi Sakamoto's style of orchestral? I can't speak intelligently. I don't know the work well enough. But yeah, I mean, like I said, people who aren't musicians are at the mercy of an awful lot of things, input-wise and reaction-wise. I really do feel that if we have any inclination toward externalizing philosophies and thoughts and emotions, you know, we have a built-in therapy session. Because even the processes of us trying to figure out what are all the actual harmonic realizations of my seething hatred of Donald Trump, if you have that, or if you're seething hatred of Nancy Pelosi, or, right, that's the other person basically, isn't it? Like that, you know, that she looks like the Crypt Keeper, like that woman, like, you know, whoever that is. I mean, no offense, you know, if you like, if she's on your wall or whatever. But, So, but if whatever that is, just to go through the process of figuring out what is the harmonic language that's not just going to be all this, I fucking hate Donald Trump, or whatever your music would be. Donald Trump can die and burn, and he has orange hair, and, whatever it is. Whatever else you say. He still has orange hair, right? Actually, I bet he doesn't. I bet it's not as bad because he's the president and there's people around who could fix that. But anyway, I bet it's like orange-ish or something. Anyway, but to figure out, okay, what else is underneath there? What a fantastic exercise for you. And especially if you've really got stuff in there. Good. That's a way better place to be writing from than just be like, I don't know. Like it would be hard for me to write a Donald Trump piece. I wouldn't know it because I'm not angry about anything. I don't care. So I couldn't dig that. But if you are like, I think that's it. Maybe we should just think if you're both a musician and a person who just has that distracted, just you want to tear your teeth out anger. Like, man, you should be a fucking like a machine gun of pieces. just be coming out. And then instead of all this like bile, it'll just be music. That's like a machine that you shit in it and then you just drink what comes out the other end. Like perfect. I can't understand how composers write those scenes that need sound designy music. Well, a lot of times it depends on what you're meaning by that. A lot of times, if you're thinking about aleatoric stuff, where it's basically toneless, it's a lot of effects and all that sort of thing. In having done as much sound design almost and theatrical mixing and such. A lot of times, I think like that's the one that'll work, but there was probably a more interesting tonal solution for it. But I also think that just following the rules of contrast, that aleatoric stuff is most interesting in the presence of supertonal stuff. So there is aleatoric stuff and effect stuff in Raiders of the Lost Ark, peppered inside this supremely tonal score. And so they become interesting and distinctive on their own. But, so in the beginning, like when they're first exploring that little cave, there's a lot of effects, a lot of glisses and Bartok Pitzes and things which could have easily sustained through the rest of the movie. But by the time we're getting to the fucking Ark of the Covenant, it's it's a whole other thing. And yet any one of those shocking moments could have easily been reduced to infrasonic stuff. And so, there are some composers, I don't want to say that you need to study, but there are some pieces you can go listen to, any of the Penderecki stuff or what's that, Nocturnus, De Natura, what I'm talking about. Somebody does. And you can just look at all the non-standard notation, and it's all shit like play the lowest note on the instrument until you pass out, or bang trumpet on the stands rapidly. There's like, okay, there's all that shit. And honestly, when it comes time to doing it, you can just, who cares? Just lift it right off the page. Like, oh, that one, yeah, that's all the woodwinds say blah, 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 while the strings turn their violins upside down and scrape it. Okay, just do that one. Oh, that's The Shining. Okay, that's fine. Nobody cares. It really, but if you can't write tonally, if you can't find an interesting way that isn't cheesy or dated sounding to it, well, then that's like the cheapest trick. Then you can just do a lot of sound designy stuff. And there's fuck tons of libraries now that it's just this, all the Symphobia stuff, just bleh, and that, there's dudes making paychecks with that. Mike, speaking of forums, Bandamp is a wonderful forum, a very friendly community of composers that only give constructive criticism. Okay, thank you. Nancy Pelosi was probably hot back in 1960. I don't know. I wasn't alive. Mike, do you have any favorite go-to sus voicings? The thing about that Untouchables thing is those voicings actually are the ones I use all the time. And I remember like the first time I really had it under my fingers was it was a Michael Brecker tune, if I can remember it. And I just remember at the time just being like, it's so dense. And so I spent like time, this is in high school, I was, whatever it is, 13, 14, and I was just in this, and I talked the other day about Last Starfighter. And there was a cue in Superman. And I kept seeing this voicing. I kept seeing this over and over and over, and it was always voiced very similarly, and it felt a very specific way under the hands. And so when I was doing this Untouchables cue, it's all that. It's just all that stuff. So when it came to actually transcribing that, like 8 out of 10 times I'd hit the right thing right off the bat, because it's that idiom, it's that language, super, super comfortable and common, and they're all ultimately very, very close to ninths or susses. So, you know, but the sus voice, sus twos over the third is one of my favorites. But you know, the voicing itself is really sort of meaningless. What's the context? Because you can't just pull out one voicing and the next chord is, unless there's a very specific reason and you get to it a certain way, and then that sets up a precedent. Voicings are always going to be in service of something, a service of drama, in service of voice, leading in service of a particular color orchestrationally. Is it more or less open voice chorale writing like? More or less. Yes, it's more or less. But, you know, that was the thing that I remember too was, well, what happens when I have a 3 chord, but then I have a 4-note chord? What happens when I have a 3-note, 4-note chord? And, you know, how do you go back and forth? For a long time, I didn't realize that, well, you just go from 3 to 4. Like, you can do that. That's totally, a doué, that's what it's for. Just pick the note that's friendliest for the one that's coming and is the one you want to stick out. But yeah, generally speaking, below middle C, we know we talk about this in the orchestration classes, below middle C, generally speaking, you're going to benefit from opening things up. Now, that's totally doable, horns. And you know what's weird? Bassoons can get away with this. More than any other group, more than horns, more than trombones, bassoons can do this. I don't know why they can do it, but they can. But generally speaking, you're not. You know, it's like whenever you're in the Hannon early piano voicing. Okay. Generally speaking, that sounds about as good as it sounds. It never. You can put that on the LSO and it won't sound good. So. I mean, if I had to take general rules, yeah, if I'm getting G below middle C, probably opening up those voicings and doing a shit fuck ton of parallel fifths. Nothing sounds better than parallel fifths. I remember that. And I knew that and had been using it, writing for stuff when I went into college and we broke out the tonal harmony. And I think it was like one of the earlier things. So I'm like, okay, this is all bullshit. Like the first 3 rules were ones I used all the time. Like, okay, this is bullshit. My introduction to Craig Safin, the composer behind The Last Starfighter, yes, was his Cheers theme tune, where everybody said, was that Craig? I didn't know that. Cheers. I didn't know that was Craig. Figured that was Mike Post, because it was all Mike Post. Which one was Cheers? Is that the one? Is that Cheers? Haven't heard that tune since Cheers was on. Oh, I think he just did the instrumental music. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know, but yeah, Mike Post did almost all those. He did. What was is this Saint Elsewhere? It's like but something like, right? Something like that. Which is, I think we were doing yesterday. But yeah, that was the first. But Last Starfighter was the first time I heard. I heard Craig Safin, or noticed his name. And I was actually a huge Freddy Krueger fan, whatever that means, when I was in high school. So he had done some Freddy music, yeah, but it had nothing to do with it. Even though he did not write Where Everybody Knows Your Name. Okay, well, that's fine. Who did? Was it Mike Post? I went to high school. I went to college with Mike Post. Mike Post's real name is Postle, Postle. And freshman year, in my freshman dorm, was his daughter Jenny Postle, and I did absolutely nothing with that. That's how retarded I was. I was in the dorm with Jenny Postle. I didn't try to nail her or hey, I didn't try to be friends with her. Nothing. And her dad was fucking Mike Post, and I'd come out to Los Angeles to be a film composer. What the fuck was wrong with me? Taxi. Oh yeah. Oh, I can't hear it, but I can. It's like a Rhodes thing. Shit, I can't hear it. Fuck, Taxi. Oh. It's got a recorder in it, right? There's a recorder in it. Oh, why can't I hear it? I can't hear it. It'll come back to me. But anyway, yeah. I mean, like I said, 80s were just. Here's a little piece of trivia for you. You know the Knight Rider theme. This thing. That was all played in real time. That was not programmed. That was a synth part played in real time. I found that out. It was Ralph Gerson. I can hardly do it. But he did that. That's impressive if you listen to it. Now that you listen to it, if you go back and actually listen to it, you'll hear that it's not mechanical. It's fucking impressive. His theme from LA Law, I don't remember. I remember, well, which one was Hill Street Blues? that Hill Street Blues? Well, I do 90s and 00 impressions. Well, in pop-wise, I can't because I graduated in high school in 1990. And was then immediately at USC and starting to do. I was doing instrumental jazz. That's what I was doing, and immediately disconnected and pulled the plug completely from what pop music was doing at the time. And as I understand it, it was mostly grunge and shit. So I know no tunes. I could pick out the idiom quickly, but it's never come up in 30 some years. I've never been asked to do a tune that's in the style of something from the 90s and by the time you're in the 2000s, I don't even know what the fuck that would even be. What would that even be? But having grown up, in the 80s and playing all the 80s music, it was like I turned the lights out because when I came out to LA, it was like, I'm doing this thing now. And I was going to do film scoring. I left at USC after a year or so and then got a record deal. I was signed when I was 20 doing jazz. It was instrumental jazz, which at the time I thought the way it would work is that I could get a name for myself doing jazz and then that would go into film scoring. That would never have worked. It doesn't work that way. It didn't work that way. But at the time it was just like, this is something that I could do. But I was purely focused on the kinds of music that I was going to be able to get a record deal on, even though I didn't listen to it. Actually, I got the idea in the dentist chair when they were taking my braces off in high school. This is where it came. And a tune by the Rippingtons came on. It was this group called the Rippingtons. And I'll never forget, I was laying in a chair and there's nothing to do because they're taking all the fucking glue off. And this tune came on and I was listening to it and it was called, I think it's called Kilimanjaro. It's actually a good little tune. But I remember listening to it and I was like, man, I could do this. I could do this. So I decided then I'm going to do that because I could do that. Even though I never listened to that stuff to this day. But I at that time I completely disconnected from pop music. But what about Simply Red? Rockford Files? Don't know Rockford Files. If I can hear it, oh. What? Something is that Rockford Files? Something like that. I never saw Rockford Files, but I can hear like a synthy kind of that's got a glissando thing on it. I think that's what that is. Simply Red. Something like that. That's right. It's the only tune I know. Right? Lady in Red. Oh, is that Simply Red? Or wait, am I wrong about that? Oh, that's not. No, who's Simply Red? Shit, I don't remember. No, that's Spandau Ballet, right, or something like that. But yeah. Now my girlfriend is almost 10 years younger than I am, so her jams, I can always tell when she's been on her fucking Spotify account because it's all. It's all 90s. It's all fucking, all these 90 jams. That was Lady in Red. Yeah, sorry. Krista Berg? I thought that was Spandau Ballet. Which one is, whatever, fuck it. That wasn't on my playlist anyway. But my girlfriend listens to all those like 90s jams. Those are totally her jams. And I was like, God, this sucks. But whatever. Twin Peaks, never saw Twin Peaks. If you don't know me by now, Simply Red. If you don't know me by now, I'd have to listen to it. But you know what? First of all, I've done this. It's on Red. There's like an hour of me transcribing 80s tunes live on a video on Red Band. If you grew up in the 90s, man, you should be transcribing all that shit and then, playing in a cover band. Would I consider doing a class where I break down the live symphonic brass pieces? I mean, I guess so. I don't know how to do a whole class on it. I mean, maybe we could just do it here or something. I mean, I can tell you that on those pieces, I was very deliberately, if you remember, I was deliberately trying to write, kinds of pieces that were typical of different idioms. So that's why we did that quasi-epic piece, and we did a chorale piece. There was like one, I think it was called Amber Waves. It was a very like Americana chorale. And And then we did that sort of heroic brass kind of piece. We may have done something else. I don't remember. But I know that I just wrote them specifically to try to showcase the different typical context for brass, and in a way in which brass can't rely on anything else to support it. It was just brass players. I had actually written a solo piece for each section too, a solo horn piece, a solo. We didn't end up with time for it, so they never got hurt. But they were actually chartered and on the stands for the first chairs, just to explore a little bit about idiomatically writing solo stuff for those instruments. But yeah, man, maybe we can take a look at them. There's not much to them. At least that's my memory of them. What I do remember is that I had written this one kind of whatever that quasi-epic piece was with all the horns, and whatever it was called, I don't remember what it was called, knowing it wasn't going to work. And I remember thinking, well, that worked better than I thought it was going to work. But it wasn't good. Taxi starts off with a C minor blues scale. Funny, because you said that, and you said C minor, and my brain went, no, it's not C minor, it's... And there it was. Something like that. Hi from Mexico. What advice would you give beginner film composers? Learn to write. That's like the biggest question. That's the biggest one. What should I do with my life? What advice? I mean, what's a non-snarky answer that's useful to that? Well, learn to write. Because regardless of whether you're a film composer, how about this? How about don't think of yourself as a film composer? Start by thinking of yourself as a composer. Because if you're a person who writes music and not just film music, you're going to have a lot more job opportunities than just film. Maybe you write for museums, background stuff. Maybe you write for TV stuff. Maybe you write for video game soundtracks. Maybe you write library music that goes in the fucking grocery store. I mean, I don't know, but that would be my first advice, would just redefine yourself as a composer. And not only will that start to free you up to think about getting jobs in other places, but it also might make it that much clearer to you that you can't have piano will travel without real chops, It's not enough to have a tool if you can't use it. If you can only use it in one context, you're not going to work that much. If you have many tools and you're an expert at them, then there are many places for you to do work. You don't just have to wait around for a toilet to break or whatever. Well, so today I'll fix a toilet, today I'll lay, concrete, tomorrow I'll put up drywall and mud it, and next day I'll paint. And, the more skills and tools you have, the more opportunities there are to work. So, plus... take my master classes and all that. The last piece I did a transcription for turned mock-up cover of was the late Barry Gray's audio logo. You love logos. This dude loves logos. 20th Century 21 Productions, not to be confused with Century 21 Real Estate. What was the Century 21 Real Estate one? Century 21. I can't, every time I go to Century 21, I start hearing the 5/8. Like it's Empire Carpet. I can't hear that. The second part is C minor. Okay, sorry. His taxi he's talking about. Replicate Hans Zimmer as accurately as possible. Okay, you want to know something? I guess I should tell you this because it just doesn't seem like it's working out. So I want to do a Hans Zimmer masterclass, but I want to do it with Hans Zimmer. To me, that's the only way to do it. And the point of the class is to see, a lot of people underestimate or don't know anything about Hans's actual musical background, that his love of Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. And they might know about it, but I don't think, nobody's actually done a musical analysis of Hans's work and the way it's changed over the decades. The very first Hans Zimmer score I ever took note of was Backdraft. But rather than talk about his process and talk about the synth patches that he uses and the sampling and all that stuff, I know that I could fill 3 hours talking about the music of Hans Zimmer, and not just the devices that things typically get. It's like if people thought about John Williams and all it was harp glisses and brass stuff. Hans Zimmer's music is basically never talked about, and what is talked about is something that's just the cap on what he's done. So I actually wrote him, and he was down. He was like, "Yeah, we should do that. Let's work out the schedule." We've gone back a couple of times in emails, but it's been like a year of going back in emails. He's super busy. I've been super busy. We have not had a second thing, but there has been at least one round of emails between me and Hans and what's her name? No offense, about doing a masterclass, a Hans Zimmer masterclass, where we talk about his music. And my goal on that would to let people know that the thing that you think Hans Zimmer is on top, you can't actually be Hans Zimmer without actually understanding all the places that he came from too. And he didn't come from sampling; he came from Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, and he has a sensibility that you may not realize is in his music, but he's generally completely misunderstood, because he tends to really enjoy at this point in his career sampling and certain devices, but it would be my goal to actually let people know that your impressions of Hans Zimmer are just that. They're just two-dimensional, substanceless impressions. The actual guy has had a long time in tonality and in music. Would not have made it as long as he had without those things. Nobody talks about it. No, he doesn't talk about it. And yet, if he's going to be the guy that's the face of scoring for all these years, I just don't understand how that particular analysis of his work hasn't been done. And I'm just the guy to do it. So I want to do it with him. And if he'll do it, if that ever works out, I like the best ever. But we'll see. But that's actually what I'd like to do. I always wanted to write for and conduct a big orchestra. I did, and thought it was the best thing in the world. Then I got a commission to write for solo instruments and learned that I know nothing. Well, that's so part of the reason that I love being a composer, but especially writing for the symphonic domain, if you will, is that I know I'll never be an expert at it. There's always a whole other level. There's always a whole other thing. And then plus, as my skill set changes or grows or whatever it does, then I change as a person, because I get older and I have a son, and I get locked in my house by my government, and there's more stuff to say. So so it's like it'll never end. There's never a point at which you're like, well, that was that. It never happens. John Williams' music is different today than it was 10 years ago. It's still changing. It's still evolving. So that's a necessary and important part of the process. So that's good. Have I ever written music for a harmony orchestra, no strings? Well, I mean, for many cases where there's no strings. Yeah, in fact, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a woodwinds and brass. Like, I want to do a thing I want to do it live, but I wanted to do the 60s TV's orchestra, which had virtually no strings. It was brass and woodwinds and percussion. That's all those Star Trek scores. There's very little, like there might be a solo string here and there, a couple of players, but the glue, and this is one of the things I would do in the live woodwinds class, all the glue and the chords are being held together by the fucking woodwinds. Lots of those TV scores, there were no strings. It's a sick, powerful template. I mean, you can do tons of shit. In fact, it just changes the way you approach it, because you can't rely on strings. That sounds like, what are you going to do? Oh, you're going to do what they did for decades. It's fucking great sound. So I've written for woodwind ensembles, and I've written for brass ensembles, and I've written for groups that don't have strings in various configurations, and choir groups, and so I've done a lot of that. I mean, over 30 years? Yeah, I've done a lot of that. But it just happens to be that if I had my druthers, I like the symphonic complement and sound. That's just a thing. But I started out writing big band music. It was just saxes, bones, and trumpets. I think there'd be a lot of interest in a Hans Zimmer masterclass. That particular Hans Zimmer masterclass. I don't know what he had one on masterclasses.com, but I I don't know it. I never saw it. All I know is that there's no way you came out the other side learning how to write music like Hans Zimmer. No fucking way. That's not what that brand is. But I've done a lot of composer. I've done John Williams, I've done Jerry Goldsmith, and I've done analysis. But they're all dead, and John Williams wouldn't do it. But I thought, man, wouldn't that be good to do that with Hans and do it live? I think people would really like that, and I think mostly the reason it would be so interesting is that I think people would be surprised by it. I think they'd be just surprised, to learn that thing on the top that you think it is what it is, it's just sitting on top of a very large foundation with a lot of stuff in it that's all taken for granted, and that's why it all sounds like Hans Zimmer now, and they all sound like imitations of it. But it's like, well, that's not it, because you can't be that without 20, 30, 40 years of all the other stuff. But anyway. Yeah, John Williams class with John Williams. Would love to do it. I don't know, actually, what I'd like to do. We already did 2 of them. No, you know what? I don't think I'd want to do it, John Williams. And the reason is because if you've taken my master classes and you've been in my forum and you see my threads here for any period of time, or see my YouTube channel, and we break shit. I tell it like it is. I tell it like it is here. And we don't pull any punches. And John Williams is a gentleman's gentleman. And it's not like I could put a couple whiskeys in the man and get him to be like, fucking Lucas. If I thought that was in there, if I thought there was any chance in the world of then I would bring him on. But Hans, I know, because we've talked and that you don't have to push hard, and Hans will tell you what it is. He'll fucking break it out, and I love that. He'd be a fun masterclass. John Williams would just, everything would be measured and polite and, and just articulate and wise, but I don't think it'd be any fun. Speaking of Star Trek, I am also working on my Blender model of what an Enterprise Connie class should have looked like in Discovery. Okay. All right. Yeah. It's actually funny. Somewhere in the way back of my mind, I've always wanted to do that original ship, that original Star Trek, the Enterprise, the Constellation from the 60s. I wanted to do that, but without changing its geometry, but to make it scale properly. Nobody's actually done that. Nobody's actually seen what that would actually really look like if it was that real size without changing the geometry. That's never been done. When I'm 70, I'll do it. Anyway, oh yeah, the Zimmer. The critic, did he do this? No, my first time I noticed Zimmer was Backdraft, I think, which I can't now hear. I can't hear anything today. How did Backdraft go? Oh. Something like that. Yeah, something like that. Something like that. Anyway, that was my first time I heard Zimmer. Connie is short for Constitution, that is true. Yeah, John would nod politely. John Williams would nod politely through our... And I'd be like, hey, John, when you do this thing all the time? Well, I just want to let you know I stole that shit. I use it all the time now. Just want to let you know. That's what I would get out of the class. Now, John, when you're writing Star Wars... not a lot of people know this... But the original rhythm for Star Wars, I only ever heard him say this one time, or it was but I have not been able to find it since. But I swear somewhere there's on the record that the original rhythm was. and that it was like they'd already recorded some takes or something, and that he was on the way to the studio, and he realized, no, it needs to... I've heard that. I swear I heard that. Anyway. Do I remember Renaissance Men? I don't. If you do a Hans Zimmer class, I really hope you include his older stuff. Well, that would be the point. The point would be exactly to do that, just to go back to Bach and Beethoven and where he started and all the earlier scores, because we do not need to go, well, so how... Okay, yeah, we get that. But that's new. That's, all things considered, that's just that thing now. And all the sound designy stuff and all the blam and all the, and that all trailers now go for some reason, whatever. All that's bullshit and nothing. It's all going away. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody's ever. But there's been all these decades. That's what all we talk about. Because that's the foundation upon which. So anyway, that's Billy Joel. That's my girlfriend's ringtone. I played this in one of our, sorry, baby. Oh, I hope she's not calling me to tell me her mother died. They just took her mother off of life support. Well, not life support, but a ventilator. Anyway, more uplifting news. But that's the theme from this movie. I love that score. And it's from Defending Your Life. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, Billy Joel. Oh, yeah, my son and I play that. I can't remember it now, but... What is that, Allentown? Suspended. But I don't remember. Like that. Well, we were playing duets on that for a while, and then that's the thing. We transcribed it, we played it, and then I forgot it. Because if you don't play it all the time, you forget it. If we'd written it down, I could have played it for you. So always write it down. Have I ever thought about Billy Joel too? I learned to play Root Beer Rag when I was a kid. I play that all the time at parties. Everybody waits until I'm fucking hammered. Like, play Root Beer Rag. They just wait. They just hear, Mike, you want another drink? And they go, play Root Beer Rag, because they want to see if I can play it when I'm fucking wrecked. And the answer is I can. It's not as good, but I can do it. Have you ever thought of doing a master class on Bernard Herrmann? Somebody asked me that. No, because I just wouldn't have any fun. I don't really like his music that much. I respect it. Respect the shit out of it. Don't really like it. Speaking of Star Wars, I saw a brand new Clone Wars. I never saw any Clone Wars. How did I meet Hans? Tell us the full story. I've told that story, and I mean... Is this a good story? Should I tell it? It's not. I'll tell you the short version. The short version is I had posted some work on this forum, which back then wasn't a total dumpster fire. It was VI control. And I just posted some work, and Hans sent me an email. That's it. He just sent me an email, and his email said something like, hey, I heard your stuff. I don't know what your schedule is. For all I know, you're doing the next 10 Spielberg films, but if you're not doing anything, why don't you come over and meet me, and we'll talk. And I went over and met with him a few times and met his people, and at the time, you could date it by, they were working on Clash of the Titans, and they were like, it was like they were shy on bodies and on cues, such that it was either that I was going to do work on Clash of the Titans, or he was going to start this film Inception. And the original idea for Inception was, at least the way we talked about it, was going to have a lot of John Barry type stuff in it, and so there was sort of this talk where like I could develop John Barry-ish type stuff. And I remember I sent him an email, and I'm like, I'm sort of working on my Zimmer stuff. And he goes, don't. The world's got enough people working on Zimmer stuff. And he would talk loosely about his ideas about it. So I was starting to just study John Barry and kind of get into the idiom of it. And then it went away. And the way he told me that was that like Chris Nolan had just asked for something right away. So his guys had just put a bunch of shit together real quick, sent it to him. Chris ended up cutting the entire film to him, and then the final score just became slightly fixed versions of those demos. Like that's what he told me. And he felt kind of bad about it, such that he's like, look, you know what, you should, you know, if you want to do another project, I'll produce something. And so I was going to do an album of like kind of library kind of stuff that you could use, and he was going to produce it. And I just kind of lost energy for it. I just didn't want, I don't know. Although the guy over there was just like, that's huge, because just he's going to put his name on that. That thing will sell. And everybody thought I was crazy. But I just didn't, I don't know. But I wanted to work with him more than anybody in the world because we would be opposite. And that's what it looked like we were going to do. But that's why that quote on Mike Forum has always been the thing. When I was in his office, second, third time, something like that, he got a phone call from his wife, and I don't know if he remembers this, but I was standing right there in his Gothic room or whatever, just us, and he goes, well, I'm here with a young composer, or Mike Verta, and he said his exact quote. He goes, he's a brilliant young composer with absolutely no career to speak of. And I think he said at the time, because I think he was thinking we were gonna do something, and I'd have more of a film career, and then we didn't. So it's this wonderful little moment. It was like it's a wet, you know, it's a hard fist at the end of a wet kiss. It's actually like my favorite professional moment in my whole life. But he's always been super, super cool to me, and I've always like way more than wanting to work with John Williams. Right? Working with Hans Zimmer would be my dream job of dream jobs from a film standpoint, just because I can't do any of the stuff he does. I do not think any of the way he thinks. And I approach it completely differently. So when it looked like there was any way that would happen on Inception, I was like, that's going to be the dream. But you know, that's why it's a dream. But it was cool. It was cool. And a lot of people think, you know, that I wouldn't like Hans Zimmer stuff because it's kind of the opposite of John Williams. But it's like that's exactly it. I don't hear it the way he hears it. That's the point. Like, you don't need to go and collaborate with somebody whose aesthetic you totally get. Do you know what I mean? So, but yeah, for sure. Yeah, man. And people have tried to goad me a lot into like anti-Zimmer stuff. And the closest they'll get is if I'm super frank about when his music is not like harmonically that complex, and it's clear where his love is. But that's not a burden. He'll beat me to that. He'll tell you in a second. He'll be like, this is what I like. For all the things that I've said about him, I have never found him to be phony or pretentious that way. He, you know, I suppose he has whatever you have if you're the top dog in the game for a long time, but that's we all have that. But actually, that's why I want to do a class with him, is because I just think, like, you know what, man, nobody gives you your actual credit. Do you know what I mean? Like, especially when you have some people are all like, yeah, it's a death of film scoring. He didn't do that. People hired him, and they were making the films. Plus, there was decades of films. Yeah, anyway. But anyway. No. He, like he said, he wasn't mean-spirited about it. And chances are, you know, I mean, for all I know, it was me. you know, for all I know, it's like, yeah, I don't actually want to work with this guy. I don't know that. He's been so cool to me ever since, you know, that there's no evidence of that either. But, you know, I don't know. But if we get to do a master class, that will be fucking great. And like I said, you know, the last conversation was, yeah, that sounds fun. We should do it. Let's work it out. That was a year ago, I think. Anyway. But that would be, I think that would be the last master class. I think that would just be the mic drop. Anyway, bing. Just sit here and just bust out a bottle of Jack with Hans Zimmer and go for 4 hours. What the fuck? Because you know I'd come armed to bear. You know I could play every score of his since the day when he walked into that master class. I'd be like, let's go over a little Miss Daisy. But that would be the point. The point would be to, you know, to let people know that it's not just the fucking ostinatos and the 15 horns, man, that there's a whole thing under there, you know? Introduction to Billy Joel was We Didn't Start the Fire? Yeah, that's late Billy Joel. That's late Billy Joel. I mean, I guess later Billy Joel. my Billy Joel. Every year this time you do a big 40% sale on your master classes. Would this be the year too? Guys, give him the coupon code for his 40% discount. I just suddenly realized my girlfriend may have been calling me for something other than to say hello. The truth is that she's cool enough that I may not be in as much trouble as I might well deserve to be. May have to just cut this short just in case, because I'll regret that the rest of my life, even if she won't make me. A master class, yeah, on Ennio would be good. Sakamoto, I just don't know their work, you know. And what I don't want to do is a class like I could do that. I could pick up a composer that I don't listen to, and I could listen to a bunch of scores and kind of reverse engineer and come up with a number of things about it and sort of do an analysis of it. But I tried to. That's, you know, everything I've done, every composer I've done a class on, I've been listening to my whole life, and I've gone through all the initial discoveries about them, and then gone to the next level of discoveries about them, and then incorporated their stuff into my work. So it's just a way more, at least for me, a way more legit place to be writing from than like just a pure analysis. But anyway, yeah, she's not responding to my text. That's probably ought to go. You know, priorities. She's my muse. She's my heart. She's my soul. She's my son. That's all that really, in the end, you know. Anyway, I think I'm just gonna check in with her, because literally there was that thing. They're gonna take her mother off of a ventilator. That was today. So I'm gonna go check in on that. And on that note, you guys go write and go and you know, listen to the stuff that we've done over the last couple of days. Go transcribe some pieces. You know, on Red Band, a few people have been starting to post things that they're doing, and like I said, there's no bad way to do it. There's no wasted time. It's just, how can there be? You know, and if you're not working right now, then this is exactly the time to do it. So go do that, and we'll see you guys probably tomorrow. And you know, we'll try to put together a more cohesive piece for tomorrow, because I realized I never actually got around to it. But I'll see what noodling reveals. All right, that's it. Guys, have a good. What's this? Wait, is this Friday? Right on. So, you know, it's Friday night, man. You know, stay in the house. Clean the bathroom. Fucking yeah, dude. You know, Friday, off the hook, off the chain. See you tomorrow.